Hey everyone, I hope you enjoy this. If you do, feel free to let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Wishing you a great time watching. Hey Reddit, buckle up because this is going to be a roller coaster of a story. I never thought I'd be that guy sharing something like this online, but here I am. Before the storm hit, my wife Emily and I were the kind of couple people envied. Or at least, that's what I thought. We met in high school. One of those cheesy meet-cute moments straight out of a rom-com. I was a scrawny sophomore trying to balance a tray of spaghetti in the cafeteria when someone bumped into me. Of course, the spaghetti went flying and landed all over her. Emily, the prettiest junior, with the kind of confidence that made guys like me nervous. She looked down at her stained cheerleading uniform and then, instead of blowing up at me, she burst into laughter. "Guess I'm your first victim," she said, grinning as she helped me clean up. From there, it was like something clicked. We started talking, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. Emily had this way of making you feel like you were the center of the universe, and I fell for her hard. By the time I was a senior, we were already planning our future. College together, a family, the whole deal. Fast forward a few years, and we were living that dream, or so I thought. We got married in our early 20s, bought a cute little house in the suburbs, and even adopted a dog named Max. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt like we were building something real. I worked long hours as a project manager at a construction firm, and Emily ran her own photography business, which meant our schedules didn't always align. But I trusted her completely, and I thought she trusted me too. Looking back, I should have noticed the little cracks sooner. Emily and I built what I thought was a strong foundation. After the wedding, life moved fast. We scraped together our savings for a down payment on a little Cape Cod-style house in a neighborhood where kids rode their bikes and neighbors waved when they mowed their lawns. It wasn't big, but it was ours, and every room held the promise of the future we were creating. I threw myself into my job. Project management wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work, and I was determined to provide. Emily's photography business took off quicker than either of us expected. She had a knack for capturing moments that made you feel something, a rare talent. Weddings, maternity shoots, family portraits. She did it all, and people loved her for it. At first, our schedules felt like a balancing act, but we made it work. Saturday mornings were our time. We'd make pancakes, sit on the porch with Max, and talk about everything under the sun. Emily had this way of dreaming big. One day, she wanted her own studio, maybe even her own line of photography products. I always encouraged her, proud of how ambitious she was. We made time for date nights too. Emily loved trying new restaurants, so every month we'd pick a spot neither of us had been to. I can still remember her excited chatter as she flipped through menus, her face lighting up when she found something she wanted to try. We also had our traditions. Christmas mornings were spent in pajamas, sipping coffee and opening presents by the fire. Summer weekends meant road trips to little towns, hunting for antique shops where Emily would find props for her shoots. But as the years went by, something changed. At first, it was subtle, easy to brush off. She'd get frustrated with me for forgetting little things like taking out the trash or picking up her dry cleaning. I figured it was stress from running her business, so I tried harder to help out. I started doing more around the house, offering to run errands or help her edit photos. Still, there was a distance growing between us. We used to stay up late talking, but now Emily would scroll through her phone in bed while I read or stared at the ceiling. She started staying late after shoots, claiming she had back-to-back clients or needed to process photos. I told myself it was just a phase, that every marriage had its ups and downs. But deep down, a small voice started to whisper, "Something isn't right." Looking back, the first red flag was so small, I almost missed it. Emily started getting more private about her phone. She'd always been the kind of person who left it lying around, on the kitchen counter, the coffee table, wherever. But now, it was glued to her hand. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured she was just busy with her photography clients, coordinating shoots, or responding to inquiries. But then I noticed she'd angle the screen away whenever I walked by, or close out of apps as soon as I came near. I joked about it one evening while we were watching TV. She was scrolling through something. Her face lit up with a smile I hadn't seen in a while. "What's got you so entertained?" I asked, leaning over to peek at her screen. Her reaction was immediate. She jerked the phone away and locked it. Nothing. Just a stupid meme. The way she said it made my stomach tighten, but I didn't push. Okay, I said lightly, trying to ignore the unease that crept up my spine. Then there were the late nights. Emily had always had a steady stream of work, but now she seemed to be drowning in it. I have another client meeting, she'd say, grabbing her camera bag and rushing out the door. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but there was this nagging feeling I couldn't shake. One Saturday, she claimed she had a sunrise shoot at a nearby park. It's for a couple who wants those golden hour engagement shots, she explained, her tone breezy as she packed her gear. I woke up early that morning, unable to sleep. Out of curiosity, I drove by the park to surprise her with coffee. When I got there, the place was almost empty, just a jogger and a guy walking his dog. No sign of Emily, no sign of a photo shoot. When I asked her about it later, she barely blinked. "Oh, they canceled last minute," she said, brushing it off like it was no big deal. "I should have texted you, but I got distracted." I wanted to believe her. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of work was making me overthink. But deep down, that little voice grew louder. After that canceled shoot, the doubts in my mind began to grow. Emily wasn't just distant, she was cold. Conversations that used to flow naturally turned into clipped exchanges. She'd come home, drop her bag by the door, and go straight to the bedroom without even saying hello. One night, I asked her if something was wrong. "Wrong?" "No," she said, not even looking up from her phone. "I'm just tired, Jake. Can we not do this right now?" Tired. That was her go-to answer for everything lately. She was tired when I asked her to join me for dinner at our favorite Italian spot. Tired when I suggested a movie night at home. Tired when I reached for her hand in bed. It wasn't just her attitude, though. There were little things, tiny details that started adding up. A faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine on her scarf. A pair of earrings I didn't recognize left out on the bathroom counter. The way she suddenly started dressing up more than usual, even for her casual shoots. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, I noticed her texting someone with a little too much focus. She didn't even glance up when I asked, "Who's that?" "Just a client," she mumbled, slipping the phone under her pillow. I wasn't proud of it, but later that night, after she fell asleep, I took her phone. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it, but my gut screamed at me to look. To my frustration, she'd already deleted whatever conversation she'd been having. I put the phone back where I found it, but I couldn't sleep. The image of her smiling at her screen while brushing me off wouldn't leave my mind. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she really was stressed. Maybe the distance was just a phase and I needed to give her more space. But the doubt was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. The breaking point came a week later when she told me she was going on a weekend photography retreat. "It's this incredible workshop with a bunch of other photographers," she explained, her voice full of enthusiasm. "It's up in the mountains. I'll be back Sunday night." I wanted to support her passion, so I didn't question it. But as I helped her load her car the next morning, I noticed something odd. Her overnight bag was packed far too lightly for a mountain retreat. I kissed her goodbye, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. As I watched her drive away, I told myself it was nothing, that everything was fine. But I couldn't help wondering if she was really going where she said she was. That weekend was one of the longest I'd ever endured. Emily was gone, supposedly at her photography retreat, but something didn't sit right. Every time I thought about her overly light bag, or the way she avoided eye contact when she kissed me goodbye, I felt that gnawing sensation in my gut. I tried to distract myself by staying busy. I cleaned the garage, mowed the lawn, and even took Max on an extra long hike. But nothing could shake the unease. By Sunday afternoon, I decided to text her. "Hope the retreat's going well. Can't wait to hear about it when you're back." Her response came hours later, and it was unusually curt. "It's been great, super busy. See you tonight." It wasn't the words that got to me. It was the tone. Emily wasn't the type to leave short replies, especially when she was excited about something. Normally, she'd be sending me pictures of her setup or gushing about the people she'd met. This time, nothing. That evening, when she came home, her energy felt off. She didn't seem tired from a weekend of learning and networking. Instead, she seemed almost jittery, like she was trying too hard to act normal. "How was it?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. It was great, she said quickly, a little too quickly. Met some cool people, learned a lot. Definitely worth it. I nodded, waiting for her to elaborate, but she didn't. Normally, Emily couldn't stop talking about her work, but this time, she gave me a summary that could have been ripped from a brochure. As she unpacked her bag, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Her camera wasn't in it. "Where's your camera?" I asked, trying to sound curious rather than accusatory. "Oh, I left it at the studio," she said without missing a beat. Didn't want to lug it around after the retreat. Her explanation made sense, sort of, but it felt rehearsed. I didn't push further. Instead, I let her unpack while I sat on the couch, trying to piece everything together. Later that night, after she went to bed, I checked her bag. Empty. No sign of notes, flyers, or anything that would suggest she'd been at a workshop. My chest tightened as I put the bag back. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. If she wasn't at a photography retreat, where had she been? And more importantly, who had she been with? After that weekend, I couldn't unsee the cracks that were spreading through our marriage. Emily's behavior wasn't just off. It was carefully orchestrated. I started noticing patterns that I had been blind to before. She'd always been protective of her phone, but now it was borderline obsessive. It was either glued to her hand or locked away in her purse, and she never left it unattended. When she did use it, her screen brightness was turned down so low that I could barely see what was on it, and she'd angle it away from me at all times. Then there were the phone calls. She'd answer in a cheerful voice, only to abruptly lower it to a whisper and walk into another room. When I asked who it was, her answers were always vague. "Just a client," she'd say, or "my mom checking in." But it wasn't just the phone. Emily had started spending more time out of the house. There were more last-minute shoots, more urgent errands, and more nights where she'd come home later than she promised. One night, she told me she had a late dinner with a client to discuss a big project. She kissed me goodbye and left, wearing a little black dress I hadn't seen in years. She looked amazing, too amazing for a casual client dinner. I tried to push the doubts aside, but an hour later, curiosity got the best of me. I called her phone, telling myself I just wanted to say hi. It rang twice before going straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Emily. Leave a message, and I'll get back to you." I hung up and stared at my screen. No client dinner should require her to turn off her phone. When she came home later that night, I asked her how it went. "Oh, it was fine," she said, slipping off her heels. "Just a lot of talk about budgets and timelines. Boring stuff." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Must have been a long conversation if your phone died." She blinked, pausing for just a fraction of a second before replying. "Oh yeah, forgot to charge it before I left." It was the tiniest stumble, but it spoke volumes. I had known Emily for over a decade, and I could tell when she was lying. The next morning, I decided to dig deeper. She left her laptop open on the dining table, so I checked her emails. Nothing out of the ordinary, work inquiries, confirmations for shoots, and newsletters. But when I opened her calendar, something caught my eye. The client dinner from the night before? It wasn't there. No appointments, no notes, no record of it at all. My heart sank as I closed the laptop. I didn't know where she'd been or who she was with. But one thing was becoming painfully clear. Emily wasn't telling me the truth. After finding her empty calendar, the doubts turned into a storm I couldn't ignore. I started to replay every moment of the past few months, piecing together all the little inconsistencies. Each one on its own might have seemed innocent, but together they painted a troubling picture. Emily's excuses became more frequent and more outlandish. Her explanations for late nights, missed calls, and sudden errands always had just enough detail to seem plausible, but fell apart under scrutiny. One Thursday, she told me she was heading to a networking event downtown. "A bunch of creatives getting together to talk shop," she said, waving me off as she rushed out the door. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, but I played along. "Sounds fun. Text me when you're on your way home." She gave me a tight smile and promised she would. By now, I wasn't waiting around for her stories to line up. Instead, I decided to test her. After she left, I called the venue she'd mentioned, a boutique hotel with a popular lounge. "Hi, I'm calling to check if there's an event happening tonight," I asked, trying to sound casual. The woman on the other end hesitated. "Not that I'm aware of, sir. We don't have anything scheduled for tonight." My stomach churned. Still, I thanked her and hung up, telling myself there might be an explanation. Maybe the event was informal, something they wouldn't list. But deep down, I knew. She didn't come home until well past midnight, her makeup smudged and hair slightly disheveled. "How was the event?" I asked as she slipped off her jacket. "Oh, it was great," she said, her voice a little too enthusiastic. "Met some cool people, made some connections." "And where was it again?" I pressed, trying to keep my tone light. She hesitated, and I could see her calculating her answer. The Pritchard Lounge downtown." "Why?" "No reason," I said, forcing a smile. "Just curious." She didn't notice the edge in my voice. Or if she did, she ignored it. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. It wasn't just the lies. It was the ease with which she told them. The woman I'd married, the one I thought I knew better than anyone, was slipping away from me, one secret at a time. I decided I couldn't live in the shadows of suspicion anymore. It was time to stop hoping the truth would reveal itself. If Emily wasn't going to be honest with me, I'd have to find the answers myself. The more I looked for signs, the more I found. Emily's patterns were no longer subtle. They were glaring. She'd leave for hours at a time with vague excuses, come home smiling like nothing was wrong, and act irritated if I so much as asked how her day went. One afternoon, she told me she was heading to the city for a new client consultation. It was an unusually casual statement for her. Normally, she'd gush about the client's story or the ideas she had for their shoot. This time, there was no detail, no excitement, just an excuse wrapped in indifference. After she left, I decided to test my suspicions. Her laptop was still open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't proud of it, but I opened her browser history. My pulse quickened as I saw a series of searches from earlier that morning. Best romantic restaurants downtown. Hotels with same-day bookings. My hands trembled. There was no way these searches were for her business. By the time she got back that evening, I had spent hours pacing the house, trying to figure out my next move. She walked in, wearing the same confident smile she always had after her client meetings. "How was it?" I asked, watching her closely. "Great," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Really promising client. I think this one's going to be a big project." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stepped closer to her. "Where'd you guys meet?" "At the River Cafe," she said smoothly, naming a restaurant I knew well. "Funny," I said, folding my arms. "I called them earlier. They didn't have any bookings under your name." Her smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. "Well, I didn't make the reservation. The client did." "Which client?" I asked, pushing harder now. "Jake, what is this?" she snapped, her tone shifting to irritation. "Why are you grilling me?" "It's just work." "Because your work is starting to sound a lot like a cover story," I said, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw something in her expression that made my chest tighten. Not guilt, but defiance. "You're being paranoid," she said, brushing past me. But her reaction only confirmed what I already knew. That night, as I lay awake next to her, I decided it was time to stop playing dumb. If I wanted the truth, I had to find it. No more guessing, no more waiting for her to trip up. I was going to follow her. The next morning, Emily mentioned she had another client shoot later in the week. This time, I made a mental note of everything she said. The time, the location, the vague details about what kind of shoot it was supposed to be, it all went into my mental checklist. When Friday rolled around, I told her I had a late meeting at work and might not be home for dinner. She barely reacted, offering only a distracted, "Okay, have a good one." At 5:30 p.m., I parked my car a block away from our house, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding, a mix of adrenaline and dread coursing through me. I didn't have to wait long. At 6 o'clock sharp, Emily stepped outside, dressed far too nicely for a photo shoot. She wore a sleek black dress and heels. Nothing like the practical outfit she usually wore for work. My stomach churned as I watched her climb into her car and pull out of the driveway. I followed at a distance, keeping my headlights off and taking alternate turns to avoid being noticed. My heart raced as I tailed her through downtown traffic. I felt like I was in some low-budget detective movie, except the stakes were painfully real. She drove to a boutique hotel on the edge of the city. The kind of place with valet parking and dimly lit chandeliers visible from the street. I watch her pull up, hand her keys to the valet, and walk inside without so much as a glance over her shoulder. I park down the street, my mind racing. My first instinct was to storm in, demand answers, and call her out right then and there. But something held me back. I needed proof, something undeniable. After a few minutes of debating with myself, I stepped out of the car and headed into the hotel. The lobby was quiet, with soft jazz playing in the background and a receptionist who didn't seem to notice me. I lingered near the elevators, pretending to check my phone while my eyes scanned the room. It didn't take long to spot her. Emily stepped out of the bar, laughing softly with someone I instantly recognized. Chase. Chase had been a close friend of mine since high school. We'd drifted apart over the years, but we still saw each other occasionally at gatherings. He was charming, successful, and married to a sweet woman named Laura, a woman Emily and I had double-dated with more times than I could count. The sight of them together, standing so close, sharing a private moment in the dim light of the bar, hit me like a punch to the gut. Emily glanced around nervously, as if checking for onlookers, before following Chase toward the elevators. I stood frozen, my fists clenched, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The doors closed behind them, and I was left staring at the floor number they'd chosen, burning it into my memory that I sat in my car outside the hotel for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 30 minutes. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each more chaotic than the last. Emily. Chase. Why now? The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Eventually, I forced myself to move. Proof. That was what I needed. Storming in without solid evidence would only give her room to deny it. I wasn't about to let that happen. I stepped out of the car, trying to appear casual, and walked back into the lobby. The receptionist glanced up briefly, but said nothing. I approached the elevators, my heart pounding with every step. I remembered the floor number, 6. When the doors opened, I hesitated. What would I find? Could I even handle it? Before I could overthink it, I stepped inside and pressed the button. The elevator ride felt agonizingly slow, the hum of the machinery the only sound. When the doors slid open, I found myself in a quiet hallway lined with elegant, cream-colored doors. My palms were sweating as I walked down the corridor, scanning the room numbers. 601, 603, 605. I stopped in front of the door, my chest tight. Voices filtered through, muffled but unmistakably familiar. Emily's laugh, soft and flirtatious, cut through me like a knife. I wanted to kick the door down, to confront them in the middle of whatever twisted fantasy they were living. But instead, I pulled out my phone and hit record, capturing every sound. Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything? Chase's voice came through clearly now, deep and calm. No, Emily said, her tone light but cautious. He's busy with work. He barely notices anything these days. My blood boiled. Barely notices? I had noticed everything, and the fact that she thought otherwise made the betrayal sting even more. They laughed again, the sound bitter and mocking to my ears. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands were shaking as I stopped the recording and turned to leave. I drove home in a haze, the recording playing over and over in my head. Every word, every laugh was etched into my memory. I knew I couldn't wait much longer. I had to confront her, to tear down the carefully constructed facade she'd been hiding behind. That night, when she came home, I was waiting. How was the shoot? I asked, keeping my voice steady. It was good, she said casually, hanging her bag on the hook by the door. Long day, though. I'm exhausted. She didn't even look at me. Really? I said, leaning against the counter. Because I stopped by your shoot today. Her body stiffened, her hand frozen on the strap of her bag. Slowly, she turned to face me, her expression a mix of confusion and unease. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and hit play. Her laugh filled the kitchen, followed by Chase's voice. Her face went pale, her jaw tightening as the recording continued. When it ended, I looked her square in the eye. Care to explain? Emily's face was a mask of shock, quickly shifting to anger. You followed me? She snapped, her voice rising. I did, I said, my tone calm but firm. And I'd say it's a good thing I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have found out you've been sneaking around with Chase. My friend, the guy I trusted. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted to the phone still in my hand, then back to my face. You've got it all wrong, she said finally, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. Oh, really? I shot back, my anger boiling over. Because it sure sounds like you've been lying to me for months, meeting up with him behind my back. If it's not what I think, then by all means, Emily, enlighten me. She ran her hands through her hair, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. We were just talking, she said weakly. It's complicated. Complicated? I repeated, laughing bitterly. What's complicated about sneaking off to a hotel with my friend and laughing about how I barely notice anything? Go on. I'm dying to hear how this is all just a big misunderstanding. Her defenses crumbled as tears filled her eyes. I was lonely, Jake, she said, her voice breaking. You're always working. You're never here. And Chase, he was there for me. Don't, I said sharply, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. I've been working my butt off to give us a good life, to support you and your dreams. And this is how you repay me. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Jake, I never wanted this to happen, she said, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to hurt me? I repeated, shaking my head. Do you even hear yourself? You didn't mean to hurt me, but you kept lying. You kept meeting him. You kept laughing behind my back. How is any of that accidental? For a moment, we stood in silence, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy between us. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the one standing in front of me. Finally, I spoke, my voice cold and steady. You know what hurts the most, Emily? It's not just what you did. It's that you thought I wouldn't find out. You thought I wasn't even worth the truth. Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't bring myself to feel anything but anger. I'm done, I said, walking toward the door. We're done. I'll figure out what to do about the house and everything else later. But right now, I can't even look at you. As I grabbed my keys, she called out after me. Jake, wait. Please, we can fix this. Don't throw everything away. I stopped in the doorway, turning to look at her one last time. You already threw it away, I said quietly. I'm just picking up the pieces. And with that, I walked out. I spent that night at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The walls were thin, and the TV barely worked, but it didn't matter. I just needed to get out of the house, away from Emily and the memories of what we used to have. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her and Chase together, laughing at some private joke or walking hand in hand into that elevator. By morning, my anger had solidified into something sharper, resolve. I wasn't going to let this slide. The next day, I called Chase. We need to talk, I said, my voice tight. Meet me at the park near my office. You've got an hour. To his credit, Chase didn't try to dodge the meeting. He showed up on time, wearing his usual cocky grin. It faded the moment he saw the look on my face. Jake, man, what's going on? He asked, his tone attempting to be casual, though I could hear the nervous edge in it. You tell me, I said coldly, crossing my arms. What's going on between you and Emily? His eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked genuinely shocked. But then he smirked, that infuriating smirk that made me want to punch him. You've got it all wrong, he said, shaking his head. It's not what you think. Don't, I snapped, stepping closer. Don't insult me by lying, Chase. I followed her. I saw the two of you at the hotel. I heard the things you said. So unless you've got a magic explanation for how that's not what I think, I suggest you start telling the truth. His smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of panic. Jake, it's not like I planned this, okay? It just happened. It just happened? I repeated, my voice rising. You're supposed to be my friend, Chase. We've known each other since high school. How do you accidentally betray someone who trusted you with everything? He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. I don't know, man. Emily, she came to me. She was upset, said you two were having problems, and one thing led to another. I didn't mean for it to go this far. This far? I snapped. You've been sneaking around with my wife for months, and now you're acting like it was just a mistake? Do you even hear yourself? I'm sorry, okay? He said, finally meeting my eyes. I screwed up. I know I screwed up. But you weren't there for her, Jake. She felt alone. Stop, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare try to blame me for this. I've been there for her, for our family, while you were busy tearing it apart behind my back. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. This is done, I said firmly. You're done. Don't ever come near me, Emily, or my kids again. And if you think I won't tell Laura about this, you're dead wrong. Chase's face paled. Jake, come on, you don't have to do that. Oh, I will, I said, stepping closer. You think you can destroy my life and walk away unscathed? Not a chance. Without waiting for his response, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there with his pathetic excuses. After confronting Chase, my next move was clear. Laura deserved to know the truth. She'd been nothing but kind to me and Emily, always showing up with a smile and a plate of cookies at our family gatherings. I couldn't let her stay in the dark while her husband continued to lie to her. That evening, I texted her. Hey Laura, it's Jake. Can we meet? I need to talk to you about something important. Her reply came quickly. Of course, is everything okay? I wasn't sure how to answer that. Instead, I suggested a quiet coffee shop near her place. She agreed without hesitation. When I arrived, she was already there, her red scarf wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw me, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. Hey, Jake, she said, standing up to greet me. What's going on? I sat down, my heart pounding. Laura, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to come out with it. I found out Emily has been having an affair. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. Oh my gosh, Jake. I'm so sorry. That's horrible. I nodded, swallowing hard. It is, but that's not all. I hesitated, feeling a lump in my throat. The person she's been seeing, it's Chase. Her face froze, her eyes widening in shock. What? She whispered, leaning back as if the words had physically hit her. I'm sorry, Laura, I said, my voice soft. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I couldn't let you go on without knowing. She stared at me, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. Are you sure? I mean, Chase, he couldn't. I'm sure, I said firmly. I pulled out my phone and played the recording, my hands shaking as her expression shifted from disbelief to devastation. When it ended, she covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. I can't believe this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. How long? For months, I admitted. I only found out a few days ago. I confronted Chase this morning, and he didn't even try to deny it. Laura looked away, blinking back tears. For a long moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at the floor, her face pale and strained. I trusted him, she said finally, her voice breaking. I trusted both of them. I know, I said quietly. I did too. She looked back at me, her jaw tightening. What are you going to do? Emily and I are done, I said simply. I can't stay with someone who betrayed me like this. I don't know what your next move is, but whatever you decide, I'm here if you need anything. Laura nodded, her expression hardening. Thank you for telling me, Jake. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I won't let him get away with this. We sat in silence for a while after that, two people trying to make sense of the wreckage left behind by the people we trusted most. The days following my conversation with Laura felt like a blur. The house was tense. Emily tried to talk to me, but I shut her down at every turn. Every time she opened her mouth, all I could see was her walking into that elevator with Chase. I couldn't even look at her without feeling a mix of anger and disgust. Laura didn't waste any time. A few days later, she texted me, confronted Chase, filed for divorce. Thank you for telling me. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction knowing Chase would face consequences for what he'd done, but the rest of me was still trying to process the mess Emily had made of our lives. One evening, as I sat in the living room, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, Emily walked in. She stood there for a moment, as if summoning her courage, then sat down across from me. Jake, we need to talk, she said softly. I didn't look up. There's nothing left to talk about. Yes, there is, she insisted, her voice breaking. I know I messed up. I know I betrayed you. And I know I've probably destroyed our marriage. But I can't let it end like this. Not without trying to explain. I sighed, putting my phone down and finally meeting her gaze. Fine, I said coldly. Explain. Tell me how sleeping with my best friend was somehow justified. She flinched at my tone, tears welling in her eyes. I'm not trying to justify it, she said quickly. I know what I did was wrong. But, Jake, you've been so distant. Always working, always focused on everything except us. I felt invisible. Her words hit a nerve, but I refused to let her off the hook. So your solution was to run a chase? I shot back. You couldn't talk to me, Emily? You couldn't say, hey, I'm unhappy. You had to blow up our lives instead? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I don't know why I did it, she whispered. I was selfish, and I got caught up in something I couldn't control. But I swear, Jake, I still love you. I never stopped loving you. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Love? Don't talk to me about love, Emily. Love isn't lying to your husband's face while sneaking around with his best friend. Love isn't tearing apart the family we built. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I'll do anything to fix this, she said desperately. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit photography if that's what it takes. Just please don't give up on us. Her words lingered in the air, but I felt no comfort in them. I didn't trust her anymore. And without trust, what was left? I stood up, shaking my head. I need space, Emily. I don't know what the future looks like, but right now, I can't even think about forgiving you. She didn't try to stop me as I walked out. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of clarity. After that conversation, I knew there was no going back. Emily's tears and promises didn't erase the betrayal or the months of lies. Our marriage wasn't just broken, it was shattered. And no matter how much glue you tried to use, shattered glass doesn't go back to being whole. I contacted a lawyer the next morning. It was surreal, sitting in a stark office with a stranger and laying out the pieces of my life, explaining why I couldn't stay married to the woman I once thought I'd grow old with. The lawyer was kind but efficient. By the time I walked out of his office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Emily didn't take it well. When I served her the papers, she broke down, begging me to reconsider. Think about the kids, she pleaded. I am thinking about the kids, I said, my voice firm, and they deserve better than growing up in a house full of lies and resentment. This isn't just about us, Emily. It's about what kind of environment we're creating for them. Over the next few weeks, the reality of the situation set in. Emily moved into the guest room, and we began splitting our time with the kids while we figured out the logistics. Every interaction with her was tense, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Meanwhile, Chase's world was falling apart too. Laura didn't just file for divorce. She made sure everyone knew why. Mutual friends started dropping him, business contacts distanced themselves, and he quickly became a pariah. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved into a dingy apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the comfortable life he used to flaunt. But revenge wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. Seeing Chase's life crumble didn't fix mine. It didn't take away the nights I lay awake wondering how everything had gone so wrong. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Emily knocked on my office door. What is it? I asked, not bothering to look up from my laptop. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she said softly. Not for the affair, I've already said that, but for everything. For letting it get to this point. For not being honest with you when I should have been. I hope someday you can forgive me. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just sadness. I don't know if I can, I admitted. But I hope you find peace, Emily. For your sake and for the kids. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, and left without another word. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. I kept the house for the sake of the kids, while Emily found a small apartment nearby. We set up a co-parenting schedule that worked for everyone, and though things were awkward at first, we eventually found a rhythm. It wasn't easy. The pain didn't just disappear, and the scars didn't fade overnight. But day by day, I started to heal. I spent more time with the kids, picked up hobbies I'd abandoned, and even started going to therapy to unpack everything I'd been through. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It hurts, it leaves a mark, but it doesn't have to dictate the rest of your life. And as for Emily, I don't know if she'll ever fully understand the depth of the pain she caused. But I've come to realize that forgiveness isn't for her. It's for me.